Welcome to the deep dive. Today, you've asked us to take a look at Drake Bell and Josh Peck.
That's right. The guys from Drake and Josh, obviously.
Yeah, their whole on-screen Brotherhood thing. We're going to unpack the real story behind that relationship.
Well, the very start, yeah. All the way up to their recent reconciliation attempts.
Exactly. And what you find is it's way more complicated than anything you saw on Nickelodeon. It's pretty intricate.
Definitely. For this deep dive, we looked at a big YouTube documentary transcript. It's called Drake and Josh Finally Explained Their Beef, full documentary from Patrick Ciesi.
Okay.
And it pulls together a ton of stuff for the old interviews, social media, all that.
Right.
But the big thing is that recent 2-hour podcast they did together. Super candid.
Yeah, that was revealing. So our mission here is to kind of cut through all the drama, all the noise, and figure out the key moments, you know?
The things that really shaped their friendship or lack thereof sometimes.
Yeah. And the personal challenges they both went through. There are some surprising truths in there, especially with them living life so publicly.
Absolutely. So let's jump in. It starts, like you said, way back on The Amanda Show.
Right, their first meeting. And it wasn't like instant best buds, was it?
Not at all. It's actually fascinating. Drake apparently didn't really like Josh much at first.
Huh, really?
Yeah, but Josh was super determined, you know? He really wanted Drake to like him.
So what changed?
Well, they found this shared love for old school comedy. Think like Abbott and Costello.
Ah, okay. Classic stuff.
Exactly. And that became the foundation, the bedrock of their early connection.
And you saw that translate pretty quickly on screen, didn't you? That comedic chemistry?
Oh, yeah. There was this one sketch, remember, the Italian mobster guys on The Amanda Show?
Vaguely.
That's where it really clicked. Even those silly lines like, oh.
Pony pajamas, what's your problem?
Yeah, and big tails. Yeah, what's your problem? Big tail, I can't sleep. It's that kind of absurd humor.
Which totally became their thing on Drake and Josh.
Totally. And interestingly, Drake apparently always dreamed of having a comedy sidekick, just like those classic duos.
And he saw that in Josh.
He saw the potential.
Yeah.
And then it wasn't just professional. It turned into a real off-screen friendship.
Bowling, hanging out, sleepovers even.
All that stuff. And The Amanda Show was huge for Nickelodeon back then. Their biggest live-action show. So from the outside.
Everything looked perfect.
Pretty much. But, and this is a huge but, this is where the story takes a really dark, previously unknown turn for Drake.
Right. Behind the scenes of this, fun kids show.
Yeah, Drake was going through something absolutely horrific. Abuse.
From his dialogue coach, Brian Peck. And this only really came out much later in the Quiet on Set documentary.
Exactly. And this context is it's crucial for understanding everything that followed, their whole dynamic.
Yeah.
The documentary detailed how Peck, and it's important to note, he wasn't related to Josh Peck at all, started giving Drake private acting lessons at his house.
Initially with Drake's dad there.
Right. His dad, Joe, was supervising at first, but Joe started feeling uneasy about Brian's behavior. Saw him touching Drake inappropriately, even in front of others.
Awful. And when he tried to say something,
he got accused of being homophobic, so he backed off, which tragically let Peck manipulate the situation even more.
How so?
He convinced Drake to cut ties with his dad, positioned himself as this father figure.
Oh, man.
And then talked Drake's mom into letting Drake stay at his house for audition.
And that's when the assault started.
Yeah. Drake's description of waking up devastating. And he kept it secret for months, living with that trauma.
As a kid. It really shows you the kind of dangers child actors can face, doesn't it? Stuff we don't see.
Totally. And think about how that must have affected him, his behavior, his relationships, including with Josh.
So how did it eventually come out?
He finally confided in his girlfriend's mother. She helped him get therapy. Then he told his own mom.
And the police got involved.
Yeah. They even did a wired phone call where Brian confessed that led to his arrest.
But Drake still had to go back to work while this was all happening.
Unbelievably, yes. He had to go back to Nickelodeon to film Drake and Josh, knowing his abuser was still working on the same studio lot.
How did he even do that? He said something like,
the worst part was, every day I got there, the monster was there. Just imagine carrying that burden as a teenager, trying to be funny on camera.
It's unimaginable. And the key thing here, relating back to their friendship,
is that Josh had no idea. None of this.
So Josh just saw Drake pulling away, being distant.
Exactly. He perceived it as Drake being standoffish, maybe even not liking him anymore.
Yeah.
You can kind of see how he'd think that, right?
Totally. Meanwhile, Drake's dealing with this immense trauma and worrying that if it came out, the show could get canceled.
Yeah, jeopardizing everything, including Josh's career, too. That's a hell of a conflict for a kid to manage.
So what happened with Brian Peck?
He was convicted in 2004, pleaded no contest, got a sentence that a lot of people felt was way too short.
And Josh only found out Peck was gone later.
Yeah, he noticed Brian wasn't around anymore and asked Drake. Drake just said he was a really bad guy.
And Josh respected that. Didn't push.
Didn't push, which, speaks maybe to their dynamic even then.
Yeah. It's just such a stark contrast in what they were experiencing, isn't it?
Absolutely. While Drake's living this nightmare, Josh had his own struggles too, though very different.
Right. Raised by a single mom, money was tight.
And he used food to cope, felt different because of his weight. He talked about how kids feel like the center of their own universe,
Yeah, that quote. Children feel like they are the center of their own universe, and they don't have that worldly perspective to make sense of their...
Exact. So different traumas, but both deeply shaping who they were becoming.
Okay, so let's shift into the actual Drake and Josh show era. The premise was simple enough.
Opposites forced together as stepbrothers, classic sitcom setup.
And on screen, Josh was often the butt of the joke, right? Drake was the cool, popular one.
Yeah. And Drake kept winning those Kids' Choice Awards, which kind of reinforced that image.
But what was Josh's take on that? Did he feel secondary?
Well, it's interesting. He said he definitely idolized Drake, but he also knew he was crucial to the show.
He felt he was pulling his weight, comedically speaking.
Right. He even said some would argue that Josh's one-liners and physical humor is what actually made the show so successful. He saw himself as an equal partner.
That makes sense. And then Josh lost a significant amount of weight during the show's run.
Yeah, that definitely changed things. Boosted his confidence for sure.
And probably changed the writing a bit too. Opened up different kinds of jokes.
Probably. But it's interesting that even though they were friends off screen, Drake's character stayed pretty inconsiderate towards Josh's character.
Yeah, that on-screen dynamic versus the off-screen reality. Maybe that created a weird tension for them or for viewers.
Could be. But man, that show was huge. There's no denying its impact.
The viewership numbers were insane, right?
Millions tuning in every week. Like 5, 6, 7 million sometime. Consistently a top cable show. A total phenomenon.
So the show ends. What happens next? Their paths really diverged then, didn't they?
Big time. Drake kind of stuck with Nickelodeon for a bit longer, continued his music.
While Josh actively tried to break away from the kid's TV image.
Exactly. And that's when Josh hit his own rough patch. After losing the weight, he got into drugs and alcohol.
Why then? Was it like trying to live a normal teenage life he missed?
That's pretty much how he described it. Suddenly looking like a normal kid and thinking,
oh, they do drugs and that's normal.
Yeah. It's a really sad insight into trying to fill some kind of internal void,
Definitely. He realized it wasn't working, though.
He had this moment realizing he felt bottomless. Like nothing external fame, looking different, could actually fix what was wrong inside.
Wow.
And that's when he decided to get sober, which was huge.
Yeah, good for him. Meanwhile, Drake's path was unexpected.
Super unexpected. His music career blew up, but mostly in Spanish-speaking countries.
Drake Campana.
Exactly. He had hit singles, albums charting high in Mexico, learned Spanish, playing huge crowds.
That's wild. There were jokes about him moving to Mexico, right? Maybe to avoid legal stuff later.
Maybe half joking at the time. It's just such a strange turn of events.
And Josh, despite his personal struggles, was getting acting prop.
Yeah, he got critical acclaim for a movie called The Whackness, showed he had real acting chops beyond comedy.
But even that success didn't fix the internal stuff.
Apparently not. That bottomless feeling persisted until he chose sobriety.
So during this time, were they still in touch at all after the show?
Sporadically. A few social media posts together here and there. 2012, 2013, 2014.
Drake did a cameo on Josh's show Grandfathered too, right?
Yeah, in 2015.
Yeah.
But it seems like Drake wanted more connection than what was actually happening.
He felt they should have just been hanging out, like old times.
Yeah, he said later, we really should have just been like, bro, want to go grab some pizza and play some video games.
But they didn't say that to each other.
Nope. That lack of communication again, it seems to be a theme.
And that theme really exploded with the wedding drama in 2017.
Oh boy.
Yeah.
Yeah. Drake's tweets about not being invited to Josh's wedding just set the internet on fire.
They were pretty blunt, weren't they?
Super blunt. When you're not invited to the wedding, the message is clear. And ties are officially cut. I'll miss you, brother.
Ouch. That's public.
Extremely public. Drake did some interviews, sounded hurt, but tried to be kind of graceful about it.
But Josh got hammered for it, right? People saw it as a huge snub.
Massive backlash against Josh. The perception was definitely that he dissed his TV brother.
And then they saw each other at the VMAs. That sounded awkward.
Beyond awkward. Josh apparently asked Drake to apologize to his wife for the tweet.
Which Drake did.
Yeah, he did. But then Josh vlogged the whole interaction and put it online.
That feels a bit performative, maybe.
A lot of people saw it that way, yeah. Kind of using the situation for content.
So what was the real reason Drake wasn't invited? We found that out later, right? on their podcast.
Yeah, finally, in that 2025 podcast chat. Turns out nobody from the Drake and Josh cast was invited.
Nobody. Except Dan Schneider.
Right, only Schneider. And apparently that was because Schneider's wife was friends with Josh's mom.
So Josh's reasoning what?
He just wanted to leave that whole Nickelodeon chapter behind him for the wedding. Start fresh.
Okay, that adds context. But you can still see why Drake would feel singled out, especially if he wanted to be closer.
Absolutely. It still stung Drake. And again, if they just talked about it before the wedding.
Might have avoided the whole public blow-up, that communication thing again.
Exactly. It just highlights how unspoken expectations and different views of their shared past kept causing friction.
So even after the VMA thing, things were still weird between them?
Seems like it. The signals were really mixed. Drake would make these comments in interviews, kind of sarcastic.
Like saying, he doesn't like me.
Yeah, stuff like that. Then they'd turn around and do YouTube collabs together.
Which then got deleted from Josh's channel later.
Right. So as a fan watching all this, you'd be totally confused. Are they friends? Are they enemies? What's the deal?
Yeah, it makes that quote ring true. Whatever you think you know of us is only half as deep as it really is.
Definitely. There was clearly a lot going on beneath the surface.
And then things seem to get even worse with that reboot pitch in 2019.
Oh, the reboot script. Yeah, that sounds like it really escalated things.
So Josh pitched an idea where Drake's character was basically a loser musician in Mexico.
Pretty much parodying Drake's actual real-life success down there. Well, Josh's character was like a super successful real estate agent.
That sounds kind of mean-spirited.
It comes across that way. And the opening scene was apparently really rough.
The hug me brother line.
Yeah, Josh's character supposedly responds with something like, hug yourself, Ed.
Wow, okay. Yeah. Not exactly heartwarming.
Not at all. And apparently the script got into some really questionable territory depicting Drake's Hispanic fan involving like a drug cartel.
Yikes. That sounds potentially offensive and just weird.
Very weird. Unsurprisingly, Drake seems to have rejected it. We don't know for sure if that exact script is real, but the story itself points to a major disconnect.
Yeah, like Josh just fundamentally misunderstood or maybe didn't respect Drake's life at that point, especially the Mexico success.
Seems that way. And then not long after that, around August 2020, Drake faced those serious legal allegations.
Right. Accusations about pursuing underage girls are a really serious situation.
Extremely serious. And what did Josh do right around that time?
He went on a press tour saying they hadn't spoken in 10 years and were never really friends.
The timing was, let's just say, noticeable. It really looked like Josh was trying to distance himself publicly while Drake was in serious trouble.
Yeah, that doesn't look great. But then came the quiet on set doc.
And that changed everything, didn't it?
Yeah.
It exposed all the abuse at Nickelodeon, including Drake's story, which most people didn't know.
Drake deciding to participate, especially after going through rehab, was incredibly brave.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
And the public reaction shifted dramatically. All that previous judgment just evaporated.
People suddenly understood the trauma he'd been carrying. There was empathy, support.
Yeah, the conversation changed completely. It became about the abuse, the long-term effects, the cycle of it all.
Drake even released that song, I Kind of Relate.
Yeah, the music video too. Super personal, directly referencing the abuse, the shame.
Those lyrics, I found beauty in my pain. I'm running away from the abuse and all the shame because no one comes to my house anymore. Just heartbreaking.
And people start looking back at his older songs, seeing hints of the trauma that were missed before.
With this new understanding of Drake, the backlash then turned towards Josh, right?
Yeah. Oh yeah. Fans were angry, accusing Josh of knowing about the abuse, or at least not supporting Drake through it, being complicit, some said.
But Drake actually defended Josh publicly.
He did. He asked fans to give Josh grace and revealed that Josh had reached out to him privately after the documentary aired.
Okay, so there was private communication happening, even amidst the public drama.
Seems so, which leads us right up to that big 2025 podcast they did together.
Josh invited Drake onto his show, a full 2-hour conversation.
Yeah, where they basically tried to unpack their entire history for everyone to hear.
And were there good moments? Did it feel like reconciliation?
There were definitely moments. Shared jokes, bits of connection. It seemed like they were moving towards a better place.
But there's always a but with these two, isn't there?
Huh. Seems like it. There were still these little subtle things. Moments that hinted maybe the feelings weren't perfectly balanced.
Like what?
Well, near the end, Josh's co-host, Ben, says, I love you, Drake. And Drake says it back genuinely.
Okay.
But Josh then kind of repeats, I love you, Drake, in a way that sounded a bit mocking. Or maybe just awkward. It felt off to some people.
Suggesting maybe Drake cared more about rekindling the friendship than Josh.
That was the interpretation by a lot of listeners, yeah. That maybe Drake was more invested.
So how did fans react overall to that podcast? Was it seen as a success?
It was really divided. Some people were thrilled to see them talking again, hopeful.
Others are skeptical.
Very skeptical. accusing Josh of being fake, maybe just using Drake's story and the renewed interest for clicks or views.
But others pushed back on that.
Yeah, saying, look, it's complicated. Maybe Josh has genuinely conflicting feelings after everything they've both been through. It's hard to judge from the outside.
Yeah, it's tough reconciling that idealized TV brotherhood with this messy, painful, very human reality.
Exactly. And that's kind of the conclusion the documentary reached, too. Their relationship is like a lot of real-world relationships.
Cycles of closeness, then conflict, tension, maybe regret, trying again.
Right. It's messy and cyclical. And it really reminds you that what you see, especially with celebrities, is almost never the full picture.
So if we boil it all down, what are the key takeaways here? What should people understand from this whole saga?
Well, I think the big thing is that Drake and Josh's story is this powerful example of how even friendship that looks solid, especially ones formed under the pressure cooker of child stardom, can be incredibly complex.
Yeah.
And they're deeply shaped by hidden struggles, by trauma.
It really shows the impact of that trauma, doesn't it? And just how hard it is to keep real connections going when you're famous.
Totally. And the challenge of growing up, changing as people, when you're forever tied to this shared past, this image.
That beef wasn't just some simple fight.
Not at all. It's like all their individual pain and unspoken feelings bubbling up to the surface over years and years.
Okay. So on that note, maybe a final thought.
Yeah, something to think about is considering how much scrutiny these two have faced and seeing their very real flaws and vulnerabilities laid bare. How much do we, the audience, project our own wishes onto them, like wanting their real lives to match the perfect friendship we saw on TV?
That's a good question. Do we put too much pressure on them?
And maybe what responsibility do we have to just let them be human? Let them figure out their relationship, however messy it is, without constantly dissecting every little move.
Yeah, giving them